I don't know how you guys normally do it. And there's our bell. We'll start off in a word of prayer, then we'll get right into the lesson. I can't remember where we left off in this, and so we're just going to restart. If I can't remember, maybe you guys don't remember what we went over. So we'll go from there. And so let's go to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for this opportunity to gather together on this Lord's Day to worship you in spirit and truth. We ask you to be with us as we go into this Bible class. Help us to learn its principles and its lessons that it is going to teach us and apply it to our lives. Lord, please be with us the rest of this day. We love you in all of our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. I've been speaking around with everyone, and I think everyone thinks I've graduated already. I got 2 weeks. I mean, anything can happen in 2 weeks. I'm not saying anything bad's going to happen. I'm going to try my best to get out of there. Of course, I'm planning, you guys already have been getting notes and letters and everything about me attending more school, and I appreciate all the support. This morning, we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 2. 1 Kings chapter 2, and we're going to read the first 25 verses. 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 25. And I'm using this Gospel Advocate workbook that I got over the last summer, when I was working with Rico. And ever since I've used it, I love it. I love the text that we'll be going over, and I like learning about the Old Testament parts because sometimes it doesn't get as much love as the New Testament does. And so in 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 25, the topic that we will be speaking on this morning is the exit of David and the enter of Solomon. David is pretty much at the close of his life, getting ready to pass on, and we'll read, of course, that here in a few seconds. But David's about to pass on, and his son is about to take the throne over Israel. And so as the text begins in verse 1, it says, "Now the days of David drew near that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. And keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in the day, in all that you do, and wherever you turn. That the Lord may fulfill his word which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your son take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Moreover, you know also what Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner the son of Ner, and to Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. And he shed the blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war on his belt that was around his waist, and on his sandals that were on his feet. Therefore do according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, for so they came to me when I fled from Absalom your brother. And see, you have with you Shimei the son of Gera, a Benjamite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a malicious curse in the days when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now, therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man and know what you ought to do to him, but bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. So David rested with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David. The period that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. Then Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Now Adonijah the son of Haggith came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. And so she said, do you come peaceably? And he said, peaceably. Moreover, he said, I have something to say to you. And she said, say it. Then he said, "You know that the kingdom was mine, and all of Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. However, the kingdom has been turned over and has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Now I ask one petition of you. Do not deny me." And she said to him, "Say it." Then he said, "Please speak to King Solomon, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Abishag the Shunammite as a wife." So Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak for you to the king." Now Bathsheba therefore went to the King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed down to her and sat down on his throne and had a throne set for the king's mother. And so she sat at his right hand. Then she said, "I desire one small petition of you. Do not refuse me." And the king said to her, "Ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you." And so she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah your brother as a wife." And King Solomon answered and said to his mother, "Now why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also? For he is my older brother, and for him and for Abiathar the priest and for Joab the son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "May God do so to me and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has established a house for me, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down, and he died. Man, a lot just happened within 25 verses. A lot. We see, of course, the big picture, and this is the main part of the lesson, the transition of David to Solomon. But we also see Adonijah, the brother of Solomon, trying to scheme up a plan to get the kingdom back for himself, trying to find a way to become king, try to take it away from Solomon. And so we see all this, and we also see many other things, and we'll hopefully get to it. But as I said, we see this transition. Now, transitions are rarely easy, whether it's for a coach, a king, a president, no matter what it is, it's rarely easy. It sometimes doesn't go as smooth as one may want it to. When you have a change in leadership, questions will start to abound. An example I can give you is when I played football for Oak Glen, just up the river. I don't know if I've said this before or not, but when I was playing football, the first 3 years of high school football, we had a certain offensive line coach, and he was also our offensive coordinator. And so we did extremely well my first 3 years. But then my senior year, we had a switch in leadership of offense coordinator. Our defensive coordinator decided to become the offensive coordinator, and that didn't do well. We didn't win too many games my senior year. I think it was 2-7. But we also had COVID, so I blame it on that. But for me, that transition was extremely hard. That transition from an older coach that I believe knew what he was doing to this newer coach that didn't have too much of the idea of what offense was. He only knew what defense was. And so that transition, from not only for me, but for my other teammates, it was a little rough. And of course, that showed in our practice, that showed in our games. Well, in this instance, we see that there's a king switching to another king, or a father giving his reign over to his son. And so when this transition happens, many questions pop up. Now, why is this? Anyone can answer. Why does questions start to pop up when a new person comes in? Anyone? Anything works as long as it's along with the Bible class? Sometimes they have questions of what kind of change will happen, what will happen now that this new king comes in. Does anyone else can think of anything? he was saying style of leadership. How will they rule? Will they be a good king or would they be a dictator, a bad king? Um, Going along with that, what are some characteristics of a good king? Just to give us something here. What are some good characteristics of a good king? There's one main one that I'm hoping you guys get, but if not, anything works. Well, what is a good characteristic? He's fair. Anything else? Patient. He's firm in what he believes. Anything else? Well, the main thing that I really, really want to point out is, I think he already said it, one that follows God, one that has God in the forefront, the one that serves him first. Because if you serve the Lord, you'll be kind to everyone. You'll be a good person. At least you're supposed to be as a Christian. But a good king could have characteristics like being clean, being respectful, being strong-minded, being someone, I'm not going to get political, being someone opposite of Joe Biden. Actually be able to think, be able to be smart, and now I'm just being mean. I'm sorry about that. But be someone that can lead instead of someone that lets the country fall apart. What are some examples of a bad leader besides a dictator? The most easiest question, or most easiest answer you can give, and just say the opposite of everything that we just said. We could just say that and leave it there. But what are some bad characteristics of a bad king? Or what are characteristics of a bad king, if I'm saying that word here? Doesn't follow God. That's a big one. Anything else? We can just start naming what Joe Biden fails at. No, I'm kidding. Well, one could not be a good listener. One could be selfish, could only think about himself. There's an event that happened within the Bible where a young king took over, and instead of listening to the advisors of his father that just passed away, he decided to go to his friends, ask them what he should do. Of course, his father was a little harsh, and so the people were asking for him to be kinder, and they would serve him. They would follow after him if he was just a lot more nicer than his father. Well, he listened to his friends, and he listened to bad advice. So someone that, of course, is a good listener doesn't listen to bad advice. They don't listen to things that will hurt them. They'll listen to the things that will help them. But for this young king, he listened to his friends, listened to what they said, to be even more worse than the father, be even more strict than the father. And that, of course, did not go well for him. I can't remember the names. There's so many names. If someone here smarter than me can remind me, we'll get there. But you see this transition happen here, and many questions pop up. I'll read some here. How will the new leader compare to his predecessor? What style of leadership will he use? We kind of spoke about this. How well will this individual get along with others? And so some of these questions pop up, just questioning, how will this new king compare to this last one? What will be the changes? What will be the new things that happen, or the old things that might stay the same? Will this new king adopt some of the old ways of this past king, or will this all be just a complete change? I know with the class that I took in school here, preaching and media, it was the class. We learned how to work all the stuff up there that they're doing. We talked about, our teacher was used to be a manager of some big corporation. And so he talked about how if someone got a job as a manager, came in and changed everything, he wouldn't be liked. But if the person came in and slowly changed things as time went on, but still kept the people in peace, that person would be liked. Well, if a good king would do that, this transition for him would go smooth. But if you have a bad king, a lot of people won't like him. And of course, there's many kings within Israel's timeline that a lot of people didn't like. I think the shortest one was 7 days. But we see that all these questions start to pop up. Now, uncertainty usually accompanies transition for at least a small portion of time. And so, because of this, good leaders will do whatever they can to make this transition as smooth as possible. Why is that? Why do they want it to go smooth? Don't want to ruffle the feathers. Anything else? Avoid chaos. So you want to keep the peace. You want to make sure everything goes to plan instead of making up the plan as you go. Well, what are some other reasons? Think about our text. What are some other reasons an old leader would want a new leader, that transition to go smooth? Think of David and Solomon. Who are they to each other? Father and son. Well, I know I'm not a father yet. Maybe down the line, I don't know. A father would want the best for his son, would want his son to be successful, want his son to do better. At least a father should want that. Want his son to do a lot of things that he made mistakes on, do the right thing. And of course, we'll see that here in this text. David would give some advice for Solomon to follow that David kind of failed at. And so he is giving advice to Solomon so that Solomon can go through this transition smoothly, so he can become that king that Israel needed at the time. And so we see from all this that this transition here from David to Solomon, this transition is something that is rarely easy, but when it comes to a father and a son, or when it comes to wanting this transition to go smooth, one wants this because either he doesn't want to be remembered as someone that didn't let it mend together the way it should, didn't let it go as smooth as possible. One's reputation might be known for something wrong, just because he didn't help the situation go a lot smoother. And so for this smooth transition, it's based upon what the old king will do for the new king, and of course how the new king will accept the advice. Here in this lesson, we see the kingship of Israel passing from David to Solomon. And of course, the children of Israel likely wondered about their new leader. Would Solomon follow David and serve in the Lord? Would he, like his father, face greater challenges from within the family than without? Or would Solomon provide stability in a time of peace and prosperity? And you can probably say David definitely wanted that later half, for him to provide stability in a time of peace and prosperity. He wanted his son to do well. And so, before his death, David would offer some very specific advice to Solomon. And so, in this lesson, we will not only read this advice, but we'll also learn whether Solomon heeded his father's admonitions. We'll hopefully get through the first 9 verses. I don't know how much time I have left, but we'll hopefully get through the first 9 verses and be able to learn about this charge that David gave to Solomon. And you know what? Let's just get into it. In verses 1 through 9, we see David's charge to Solomon. Now, with David being aware of his life drawing to a close, he took the opportunity to give advice to his son. David, of course, knew the principle of Hebrews 9:27 that it is appointed unto men once to die, and after that the judgment. He knew that he wasn't invincible whatsoever. He knew that he was going to go the way of the earth, as the text says. He knew that he was going to pass on. And so he wanted to encourage his son. He wanted to charge his son to do four things here from our text, but he wanted his son to be strong because there's going to be some stormy waters ahead of him. David urged his son to be strong and act like a man. Now, this admonition calls to mind the Lord's charge to Joshua at the beginning of his time as Israel's leader. In Joshua chapter 1 and the verses 9, it says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Here he's giving encouragement. David is given this same encouragement to his son. Another place is in what Paul does towards the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, and the verse is 13. It says, "Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave and be strong." This encouragement here is for Solomon. It's encouraging him, telling him that I'm going to pass away. This is David, of course, speaking. I'm going to pass away. And so you're going to have to act like a man. You're going to have to push forward. Even though I am passing away, you have to be strong. You have to be courageous. And then that leads into the pieces of advice that he gives his son. The very first piece of advice David stressed upon Solomon was that his actions had to be based upon God's direction. He had to follow all the testimonies, all the commandments, all the statutes, everything that God had commanded, Solomon had to follow. And if he did, well, he'd be on the throne of Israel as long as he lived. And of course, that promise to David, as long as his sons followed the Lord, did all these things, he wouldn't lack a son on the throne of Israel. And so David knew that. And so he wanted his son to have his actions based on God's directions. We can see with David's life that he kind of started out pretty good, but then he fell away. He did what he did with Bathsheba, and he had a man killed. And so he sinned. And so he learned from that sin. He learned from that mistake. And so now he is telling his son to don't do that. Try to stay away from that, to follow the Lord. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 18 through 20, we here in this text, Moses would describe a kind of behavior that a king should have. It says, "Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book, from the one before the priests and Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it to all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, and that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel." For one to have his actions based on God's direction, for one to as this verse here says, to have a long reign in the kingdom, you have to fear God. You have to do what he says to do. And so this piece of advice here for Solomon is to follow the Lord. Now that is one of the best, that is the best advice anyone could give anyone, to follow the Lord. That is the best piece of advice anyone could give. But for a king of Israel to follow the Lord, that was extremely important. Because throughout the years and the timeline of all the kings, the ones that didn't follow the Lord, they didn't last long. But the ones that did, they lasted a lot longer. David, Saul, and Solomon lasted 40 years. Of course, they stumbled here and there, but they followed the Lord. And so that first piece of advice was to have his actions based on God's direction. The second piece of advice is that David sought to impress upon Solomon the importance of trusting in God's promises. As I said, that promise that God made to David, I almost said Daniel, I'm in the book of Daniel in class, but to David, was that if his sons take heed to their ways, to walk before me in the truth with all their heart and with all their soul, God said, "You shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel." As long as they did this, his sons would reign. Now, of course, if you know anything about the kings, the kingship over Israel ended. It stopped after, I believe, Zedekiah. After all of the destruction of Jerusalem happened, it ended. But God still kept his promise. God would would call for one to come out of that land, and that of course is Jesus. Jesus would come from the lineage of David, be a descendant of David, and he would be the new king. And he of course is still reigning today, and he will forever. And so the second piece of advice, the first one was to have his actions based on God's direction. The second one is to trust in God. That's another thing that we can apply to our own lives. We should trust in God. That is something that I believe probably everyone struggles with. I know I have multiple times and probably will still in the future. But trusting in God is what all of us need to do because he is in control. He, of course, is the creator. We are the creation. Now, the third piece of advice would mainly go towards Solomon, the last two pieces of advice that he'd be given. The third one, after encouraging him to have all of his things based on God's direction, David would turn his attention to some more very practical matters. Certain individuals posed a threat to the kingdom. Who are they? Who are the ones that posed a threat? We named them when we read it. Shimei. Who else? Who's the big one of the text that we read that tried to get Abishag the Shunammite as a wife? Adonijah. Who else? There's one more, maybe two more. I can't remember. I'll give you a text to you. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear what you said there. Whoever said that. Bahurim, sons of Bahurim. And then, of course, Joab. Joab did a lot of things during the time of David. Did a lot of things. But the main one for our text is Adonijah. Adonijah was warned, and if we had the time, we'd get to that and explain why he was being put to death. But Solomon was charged to take care of those who posed a threat against the kingdom, those who have committed treason against the king, against God's chosen. And so the reason David had him do this is because he wanted his son to have a smooth transition. He wanted his son to firmly establish his kingdom, which he ended up doing, because he listened to his father. Now, to show kindness to the sons of Barzillai, I think it was, to show kindness to them because they were loyal. They stayed true to the king. They didn't commit treason like the others did. In a time of war, they stayed with David. And so they were going to be given one of the most highest honor, and that was to eat at the king's table. I don't know if there's anything higher than that, maybe becoming second in command, maybe, I don't know. But being able to eat at the king's table is something that is honorable, is something that is of high honor. Not many people get to do that and live. And so these four pieces of advice here, to have his actions based on God's direction, to trust in God, to take care of the ones that pose the threat, and then to show kindness to the ones who were kind to, who were loyal to David in time of war. He tells his son to do these things. In a way, and if you know how Solomon began very strong. He listened to his father. And of course, Solomon went on to do other things, and I don't know I know the Bible doesn't say that he turned around and he repented, but from reading Ecclesiastes, reading some of the text, it seems like he did when he talked about when he spoke to his sons, when he told them advice. It sounds like, to me, this is just my personal belief, of course it doesn't say it, it seems like he learned from his mistakes as his father did, and It just seems to me that he repented, but of course the Bible doesn't say that. And so in this first 9 verses, we see this charge. How much time do I have, Bob? All right. I got a lot of time then. We'll move on to verses 10 through 12. Here we see the transition finally take place. We see David, his death is reported in simple terms. The text states that David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And so as David had predicted, he went the way of all the earth. He knew he was going to die, and so he wanted his son to be prepared. That last text there, I've been wanting to make a funeral sermon out of it because it's a good text for that, I believe. But anyhow, David knew that he was about to die, and so he charged his son. Now we see his death. Now, David's life was far from perfect, but he never stopped serving the Lord, and that's something we can learn from. Even though we fall, we fail, we have to serve the Lord. We can't, righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets back up. We have to serve the Lord. We have to try our best to make it to heaven, to do his commandments. Now, because of his faith in God, during his life, David was able to face the giant Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verses 45. And also because of his faith in God, David was able to face the difficulties that emerged from his family. 1 Kings chapter 1, 29 through 30. Because of this, because of him serving the Lord, because of him going back to the Lord, he was able to reign for a good amount of years, for 40 years. It, of course, says that he reigned 7 years in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. He followed the Lord, and so he reigned a decent amount of years. Now, Solomon would take David's place as Israel's next king. Verse 12 says that he sat on the throne of his father David, and that his kingdom was firmly established. Now, the stability that characterizes Solomon's rule is significant. The fact that his kingdom is firmly established, unlike his father's. His father had multiple things that caused his kingdom to not be firmly established. He was away. He didn't do some of the things that a normal king would do. So normally, kings would go out and fight the wars with their armies. Well, he stayed back. And of course, Joab was the one that went out and fought for him. And of course, all the army wanted to follow him. But now I'm going on a tangent. But all the army wanted to follow him. And Joab, of course, being one of the enemies, threatened to take over a city and become the next king. He threatened that. And that's why he was going to be taken care of. But for Solomon, he listened to his father. He listened to his father's admonitions to take care of those who posed a threat. And so his throne was firmly established. And so Israel had the king that God intended. Israel had the king that didn't have any problems right out of the gate. This moves us on to verses 13 through 25. And of course, now this is separate from what just happened. This is no longer the transition. Solomon is now reigning as king over Israel. And the first problem that arises is his brother, or kind of brother, through another mom, goes to make a request. And so what he does here is he more than likely went aside and thought, how could I get the kingdom for myself? This was something that was planned before he had to carry it out. It was something that he didn't just think of along the way. He planned this out. He knew that Solomon would never refuse his mother because Solomon loved his mother. Solomon was what's the word for it? Mama's boy. He loved his mom. And so he would never refuse anything. He even had a throne next to his throne for his mom to sit. And so Adonijah knew that. Adonijah knew that if he used Bathsheba, that he could possibly, maybe, get what he wanted. And so Adonijah went to Bathsheba. He arose and he went to her and asked her if you could ask King Solomon for me to give me Abishag the Shunammite as a wife. Now, that caused a problem. That's why when you look at the text, when you look at Solomon's response, he gets a little upset, and I believe it's a little bit of sarcasm. Why? He pretty much asked, why would you do this? And then he goes on to say, should we just give him everything? Should we just give him the whole kingdom then? And of course, is not the case. He's not going to do that. The reason this is a problem is because if Adonijah was given Abishag as his wife, his claim to David's throne would be renewed. He would be able to have a little bit of leverage. He'd be able to become king if chosen. And so, recognizing this, when Bathsheba brought the request to him, Solomon, as I said, responded, why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also? For he is my older brother, and for him, and for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah. He, of course, here names the ones that were posing a threat towards his kingdom, the ones that had committed treason. And so he was going to take care of them. And our text continues after verse 22 on that he sent someone out to take care of him. Now, King Solomon understood that Adonijah's request could neither be granted nor tolerated. His response was swift and it was harsh. Adonijah's sentence was death. As I said, Solomon sent Benaiah to execute Adonijah. Now, the reason he got such a harsh punishment is because of what happened before. Here, I'll go back and see if I can find it. After Solomon was anointed king, Adonijah arose and went and took hold of the horns of the altar. He did this to plead for mercy. So he was already at this point in 1 Kings chapter 1 and the verses 50, he was already pleading for mercy from Solomon, and Solomon gave it. Solomon extended that somewhat olive branch to him, if you want to call it that. He gave him mercy. But in response to this, and to response of him begging for mercy, Solomon said, if he proves himself a worthy man, not one hair of him shall fall to the earth. But if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. And Adonijah, of course, more than likely lived with Solomon at that point. It was very close. Now, had Adonijah followed Solomon's orders, his life more than likely would have been spared. But he didn't follow those orders. He ended up committing wickedness, and that, of course, is that treason that he's committed here. And now he's going to receive that punishment that he was told he was going to get. He was showed mercy already. Now he's going to get that punishment because he didn't listen. But Adonijah went to Bathsheba. He knew that she would do this, be able to do this. And so he went to her, asked for this. And of course, Solomon, having wisdom, understanding of things from God, he was able to see this plan before it even was fully carried out. He was able to stop it right before anything ever happened. And that's why his kingdom is firmly established. He took care of things like that posed a threat to his kingdom. He was able to stop it. And so he had smooth sailing right into his kingship, into his reign. Now that ends what I have for the text, and it kind of goes into some application here, and there's a lot of application we can get from all of this. We can see that David's exhortation to Solomon is both memorable and it's encouraging. The aging father called for his son not only to lead the nation, but to do so by following God's instructions. Although Solomon did not always put God first during his reign, he offered similar advice to his children. And this is what I was talking about, where it seems like Solomon turned around at the last parts of his life. In Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. Here Solomon wrote, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. What I get from this verse is I've learned from my mistakes. And of course, he speaks in the book of the ending of Ecclesiastes. He says man's purpose is to fear God and to keep his commandments. And so to me, it seems like he has learned. He has learned that following God is the only direction anyone can go if they want to make it to heaven, if they want to be saved, if they want to do good in life. That is following the Lord. Now, it continues here. Unlike David, Solomon did not hesitate to dispense justice, whereas David failed to properly deal with the actions of Amnon and Absalom. Amnon was a king at the time that was to be killed. One of the prophets told David that this king needed to be dealt with, to be taken care of, and David let him live. And then, of course, David's son Absalom, David didn't want his son to die because it's his son. Absalom tried to kill his father, tried to take the kingdom over for himself. Well, he ended up dying because of someone killing him. And, of course, David was upset with that. But David failed to properly deal with those two men. But Solomon reacted swiftly and decisively to Adonijah. He stopped it. I don't know if I can say this, but he nipped it in the butt before it went anywhere. Now, this is exactly what David indicated should characterize Israel's king. In 2 Samuel chapter 23, in the verses 3, he said, "He who rules over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God." And so, in a way, you can see that Solomon listened to what his father had commanded. Of course, Solomon stumbled away a little bit later in his life, but he started out strong. We have a few questions here we can get into. These are extremely simple questions. I'm a simple man, so I like simple questions. First question is, where did David tell Solomon he was going? And that is in verse 2 of our text. Where did David tell Solomon he was going? The way of the earth. He was going to return to the dust, like all of us will someday. Question number 2. What did David urge Solomon to keep? Verse 3. What did David urge Solomon to keep? The charge of the Lord, to follow his every commandment, his every testament, his every statute. He was to follow that. Question number 3. These are, like I said, very simple, so we'll move through them pretty quickly. Question number 3. What did David believe the Lord would do? Verse 4. The only reason I'm doing this because repetition is the key to learning. That's what I learned in school. If I leave there and don't know that, then I didn't learn anything. But it's good to do some repetition. What did David believe the Lord would do? Verse 4. To keep his promise, my mind went blank there. To keep a son on the throne of Israel as long as the son he followed the Lord, as long as the son did what they were supposed to do. David had full belief that God would fulfill his promise. Question number 4. Whom did David encourage Solomon to punish? We kind of answered this already, but who did he encourage to punish? Verses 5 through 6 and verses 8 through 9. Who did he encourage to punish? Well, you have Joab. You have Shimei, the son of Gera. You have a couple other people. Bithar the priest. He encouraged Solomon to punish them before anything happened. I'll skip those questions and go into the discussion where it's a lot better. Those are just extremely simple questions. First question, what does this passage teach us about leadership? And anyone can answer. What are we taught about leadership here? Anyone can answer as long as it's with the Bible class. What are we taught about leadership? What is the one thing I told you guys about? The one main thing that a good leader should do? Follow the Lord. This passage teaches us if one follows the Lord, nothing but good can come out of it. Nothing but a long-lasting kingdom can come out of it for Solomon's case, if he would have listened to what the Lord had commanded. And so this passage teaches us that following the Lord is one of the most important things. Of course, teaches some other things too, but we'll move on to question number 2. Why do you think David warned Solomon about certain individuals? Why do you think he warned him about these men who posed a threat to the kingdom? I was about to say I gave the answer there. If he didn't take care of them, they more than likely would have caused a problem for him. This transition wouldn't have been smooth at all, and his kingdom wouldn't have been firmly established. There would have been a lot of problems. And he would have had to do what his father did. I see your hand back there. Well, I kind of look at it as he's a son, or he's a father giving advice to his son. I don't know if he would have known it, that it was from God. I don't think the text says anything about him knowing that it was from God, but it's advice from his father. And so if I was given advice from my father, which my father has given me a lot of advice, it'd probably be a wise thing for me to follow after. Yeah. Yeah, like he said, he should heed what he said. If it is coming from God through David. You should heed what he says. You should do this advice. Having his actions based on God's direction. That, of course, is him saying to follow the Lord. That is something all of us should do. That is something that he needed to do if he wanted to be reigning over Israel for a long period of time. He, of course, attempted to do it, and he ended up failing. Well, well, didn't the Bible say that he was given wisdom or understanding from the Lord? Maybe he understood that this was good advice. Maybe he understood that this was okay advice, that this was important advice that he had to follow. Of course, as you said, David stumbled here and there, but everyone does, and I'm not saying that is his excuse, but Solomon would have been able to understand if this was good advice or not. And I mean, by looking at it, it's extremely good advice, I believe, especially the first two, to trust in God and to follow, have all of his actions based on God's direction. Did I answer your question at all, or did I do something? An answer? Yeah. I would have to do more study myself if there is an answer, so I apologize for not being able to help you out. I'm slowly learning myself. I'm a little new to this a little bit, but I'm working on it. If anyone ever knows the answer, if anyone does know the answer, you can help them out for me. I'll let you do it. All right, well, that's the last bell. I thank you for all your participation. I want to close in a prayer real quick, and then we'll go into services here. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for the opportunity to be together. We thank you also for helping us go through this portion of your word. We ask you to please help us apply its principles to our lives so that we can follow after you and do what you say. Lord, we love you in all of our hearts, and we ask you to please be with us. In your Son's name, we ask and say these things. Amen.